The Sonoran Desert stretched out like a canvas of broken promises, its endless expanse broken only by the jagged silhouettes of distant mountains and the razor-thin lines. Elena Rodriguez was meticulously painting. Her hand moved with practiced precision, each stroke a testament to years of geological training and something far more complex beneath the surface. The survey marker gleamed in the harsh Arizona sunlight, a metal stake that seemed to pulse with more significance than any ordinary geological tool. Around her, the landscape breathed a living, watching entity that held secrets older than the ground she studied. Elena's fingers gripped the paintbrush, calloused and steady. To any casual observer, she was just another field technician, another anonymous worker documenting the Earth's subtle variations. Her olive-green field jacket, dust-covered hiking boots, and wide-brimmed hat screamed nothing more than professional utility. But professionals, she knew, were rarely what they seemed. The wind picked up suddenly, a characteristic desert shift that could transform from a gentle whisper to a punishing gust in moments. As it whipped across the open terrain, Elena's hair, usually braided tightly and tucked beneath her hat, came loose. The wind was a storyteller, and today it had a revelation. For just a moment, the breeze lifted her dark hair, exposing the back of her neck. And there it was, the tattoo. A phoenix rendered in intricate lines of deep crimson and burnished gold. Its wings spread in a moment of perpetual resurrection. Not just any tattoo. This was a mark that carried weight, history, a promise of something far beyond a simple piece of ink. She knew someone was watching. The feeling wasn't new. Elena had lived with this sensation for years, a heightened awareness that went beyond professional paranoia. It was survival, coded into her DNA through years of training that defied conventional military or intelligence protocols. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Always know your surroundings. The moment you believe you're safe is the moment you become a target. Miguel Rodriguez hadn't been a typical father. A deep cover operative who had navigated the most dangerous geopolitical landscapes. He had raised Elena not as a daughter, but as a potential instrument of national security. Every lesson was a test. Every interaction a potential training ground. The survey lines she was painting weren't just geological markers. They were coordinates, information points that meant something entirely different to those who knew how to read them. What looked like a simple geological survey was a complex dance of information gathering, strategic positioning, and something far more dangerous. Another gust of wind. This time, she heard it, the almost imperceptible sound of a distant mechanism. A drone? A telescope? Something was tracking her movements, cataloging every minute detail. Elena's muscles tensed, but her hand remained steady. Years of training meant that her external composure never betrayed her internal alertness. She continued painting, each stroke deliberate, each movement calculated. The tattoo on her neck burned, not physically, but with a metaphorical heat that spoke of memories, of missions, of a life lived in the shadows. The phoenix wasn't just a symbol, it was a narrative, a promise of transformation, of rising from impossible circumstances, of rebirth through fire. Her mother's voice joined her father's in her memory. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, not to be confused with her daughter, had been a forensic analyst with the kind of analytical mind that could deconstruct a crime scene or a global conspiracy with equal precision. She had taught her daughter that information was the most potent weapon, that understanding the intricate web of human motivation was more powerful than any firearm. The marker she was painting would mean nothing to most, but to the right eyes, it was a signal, a communication method so subtle that it would bypass traditional intelligence gathering methods. Geological surveys were perfect covers. Who would suspect a field technician of being anything more than someone documenting the Earth's subtle changes? As the sun continued its relentless descent, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. Elena knew this moment was more than just another day in the field. Something was coming. The wind, the tattoo, the carefully painted lines, they were all converging. Her hand didn't shake. Her breath remained controlled. But somewhere deep inside, a storm was brewing, a phoenix preparing to rise, to transform, to burn away everything that had come before. The desert watched, the wind listened, and Elena Rodriguez continued painting, each stroke a word in a language only a select few would ever understand. The Rodriguez household was never a home. It was a training ground. Elena's earliest memories weren't of playground laughter or bedtime stories. They were of calculated lessons, of silence that spoke volumes, of movements so precise they bordered on choreography. Miguel Rodriguez moved through their El Paso home like a ghost present yet perpetually absent, his very existence a careful construct of controlled information and strategic purpose. Her mother, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, was different. Where Miguel was pure tactical precision, Sofia brought an intellectual warfare that was equally devastating. A forensic analyst with connections that stretched across governmental and academic circles, she viewed the world as an intricate puzzle waiting to be decoded. By the time Elena was 5, she could disassemble and reassemble a communication radio faster than most adults could make a phone call. Her toys weren't dolls or building blocks, but carefully disguised training tools. A seemingly innocent puzzle box became a lesson in lockpicking. A set of colored blocks transformed into a complex exercise in cryptographic pattern recognition. Information is survival, Sophia would tell her, her dark eyes boring into Elena with an intensity that both terrified and inspired. Never let them see what you're thinking. Never reveal more than you intend. Miguel's lessons were more physical. Their backyard became a silent battlefield where traditional parenting dissolved into a rigorous training regimen. By 8, Elena could move through their property without making a sound, could identify multiple exit strategies in any given room, and understood the fundamental principles of situational awareness that most special forces operatives took years to master. It wasn't abuse. It was preparation. The Rodriguez family existed in a liminal space, neither fully civilian nor completely military. Miguel's background was a carefully curated mystery. Officially, he was a retired military consultant. Unofficially, he had spent decades in the most classified operational units, working in spaces where national security wasn't just a concept, but a breathing, evolving entity. Summers that might have been spent at beach camps or summer schools were instead dedicated to intense training. Languages came first. By 12, Elena was fluent in Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin, her accent so perfect that native speakers would never detect her as anything but local. Geographical knowledge wasn't just about memorizing maps, but understanding geopolitical tensions, cultural nuances, and the invisible lines of power that traversed continents. Her mother's forensic background added another layer to her education. While other teenagers were learning algebra, Elena was studying complex behavioral analysis, understanding how to read microexpressions, detect lies, and manipulate social interactions with surgical precision. The Phoenix tattoo wasn't a rebellious act of teenage self-expression. It was a carefully planned symbol, a marker of her family's unspoken legacy. Each line, each curve represented a transformation, the ability to rise from destruction, to reinvent oneself completely. Miguel never explicitly discussed his past missions, but Elena learned. Fragments would emerge during seemingly casual conversations. A mention of an operation in the Hindu Kush, a brief reference to a diplomatic incident in Venezuela, coded stories that spoke volumes to those who knew how to listen. By 16, Elena was no longer just a student. She was a weapon in development, a complex system of skills and intuitions that defied traditional categorization. Her academic records were impeccable, top of her class in geological sciences, with research papers that caught the attention of senior academics. But those who looked closer would find something else: subtle inconsistencies, gaps that couldn't be explained, connections that seemed to exist just beyond the realm of normal understanding. The day she was recruited wasn't a surprise. It was an inevitability. They didn't come with official documents or military insignia. They arrived as academic representatives, as geological survey coordinators, as people who seemed to be nothing more than professional colleagues. But Elena recognized the signs, the way they moved, the calculated casualness of their interactions, the slight micro-expressions that betrayed years of specialized training. Her parents didn't say goodbye. They didn't need to. This was what she had been prepared for her entire life. The phoenix tattoo burned against her skin, a promise, a declaration, a reminder that in their world, survival meant constant reinvention. Like the mythical bird, she would burn, she would fall, and she would rise again, more powerful than before. The Rodriguez legacy was never about a single mission. It was about creating something greater than any individual. A lineage of shadows, protectors who operated beyond the visible spectrum of national security. And Elena was just beginning. The geological conference in Denver was supposed to be routine. Another academic gathering where researchers would present their latest findings, network, and discuss emerging trends in earth sciences. But for Elena Rodriguez, it was anything but ordinary. Her presentation on tectonic stress patterns in the Sonoran Desert was meticulously prepared, not just as an academic exercise, but as a carefully constructed demonstration. Each slide, each data point was a subtle test, a complex puzzle waiting to be decoded by the right observers. They were watching her, not the academic attendees, not her peers, but a different breed of observers who saw beyond the surface-level research. The first approach came during the coffee break. A woman in her early 50s, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that screamed corporate rather than academic. Her movements were too precise, her eyes too calculating to be a typical conference attendee. "Impressive work, Dr. Rodriguez," the woman said, her voice neutral, professional. No hint of genuine admiration, just a clinical assessment. Elena knew the dance. She had been prepared for moments like these her entire life. Her response was measured, controlled. "Thank you. Geological surveys are more art than science sometimes." The woman, Dr. Victoria Reyes, as her conference badge indicated, didn't smile. Instead, she slid a simple business card across the table. No logo, no contact information. Just a set of coordinates handwritten on the back in precise military-style notation. "We'd like to discuss your research further," Reyes said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. The recruitment wasn't a traditional hiring process. It was a series of calculated tests, each designed to probe the depths of Elena's capabilities. The conference was just the first stage, a preliminary assessment of her analytical skills, her ability to present complex information, and more. Importantly, her potential for something far beyond academic research. Over the next 48 hours, Elena found herself in a series of increasingly intense interviews. Not in conference rooms or office spaces, but in locations that seemed randomly selected, a secure government facility disguised as a geological research center, a private airstrip outside Denver, a nondescript building that could have been anything from a tech startup to a federal agency. Each interaction was a test. They didn't just want to know what she knew. They wanted to understand how she thought, how she processed information, how she would react under pressure. Psychological assessments blended seamlessly with practical skills evaluations. One moment she was solving complex geospatial analysis problems. And next, she was navigating a simulated high-stress scenario that tested her decision-making abilities. Her parents' training became evident in every interaction. The micro-expressions she had learned to read, the ability to control her own responses, the deep well of knowledge that went far beyond traditional academic boundaries. All of these were put under a microscope. The final test came unexpectedly. A simulated crisis scenario that blended geological research with national security implications. Elena was presented with a complex problem involving potential seismic activity near a critical infrastructure site. But this was no ordinary research exercise. The scenario was a carefully constructed labyrinth. Each decision point was designed to reveal not just her technical skills, but her ability to navigate complex ethical and strategic challenges. How would she balance scientific integrity with potential national security concerns? How quickly could she identify the underlying patterns that most would miss? Victoria Reyes watched from behind a one-way mirror, her expression unreadable. Elena's solution was elegant. She didn't just solve the problem, she deconstructed it, revealing layers of complexity that went far beyond the initial brief. Her approach demonstrated something far more valuable than technical expertise, an ability to see connections that others would miss, to understand the broader implications of seemingly isolated data points. When the final assessment concluded, there was no dramatic reveal, no congratulatory speech, just a simple folder slid across a table. "Welcome to Project Phoenix," Victoria said, her voice devoid of emotion. The name was no coincidence. The phoenix tattoo Elena had carried her entire life suddenly felt like more than just a family symbol. It was a prophecy. Her recruitment wasn't about filling a position. It was about activating a weapon that had been years in the making. Every lesson from her parents, every skill she had developed, every moment of her life had been preparing her for this. Elena Rodriguez was no longer just a geological researcher. She had become something else, entirely a shadow operative, whose true mission was yet to be revealed. The game was just beginning. The training facility was nowhere, and everywhere a complex nestled deep within the Chihuahuan Desert, so remote that satellite imagery would reveal nothing more than a desolate landscape of rock and scrub. Project Phoenix didn't believe in leaving traces. Elena's first weeks were a crucible of impossible challenges. They weren't training her to be a soldier. They were reshaping her into something far more dangerous, a precision instrument of national strategy. The days blurred into an unrelenting sequence of physical and psychological trials. Mornings began before dawn, with training that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. Advanced combat techniques merged with psychological warfare, geospatial analysis intertwined with covert operational strategies. Her instructors were ghosts operatives with histories so classified that their very existence was a state secret. Some were former special forces. Others came from intelligence agencies. So deep underground, they were little more than whispers. Each brought a specific set of skills, a unique perspective on survival and mission execution. Dr. Marcus Chun, her primary handler, was different from the others. A former MIT professor turned deep cover operative, he saw Elena not as a weapon to be wielded, but as a complex system to be understood and optimized. "You're not just learning skills," he would say during their intensive briefings. "You're learning to become a living intelligence network." The physical training was brutal. 12-hour endurance exercises that combined extreme terrain navigation with precision marksmanship. Elena learned to move through landscapes like water invisible, adaptive, deadly. She could traverse 50 miles of desert terrain with minimal equipment, could change her appearance and identity faster than most people could change clothes. But the mental training was where she truly transformed. Language wasn't just about communication, it became a weapon. She learned to adopt accents, so perfect that native speakers would never detect her as an outsider. Psychological profiling became second nature. She could read a room, understand power dynamics, and manipulate social interactions with surgical precision. Her first real mission came unexpectedly. The target was a high-level financial intermediary operating in a complex network of international arms trading. On paper, he was a legitimate business consultant. In reality, he was the linchpin connecting several destabilizing forces across 3 continents. The mission wasn't about elimination. It was about sending a message. Alina's approach was clinical. She spent weeks building a persona, a geological consultant working for an international research firm. Her cover was so meticulously constructed that it became more real than her actual identity. Every detail was perfect. Every potential point of verification was carefully mapped out. The operation took place in Beirut City, where shadows move faster than light, where every interaction was a potential minefield of political and social complexity. Her target moved through high-end diplomatic circles, believing himself untouchable. He was wrong. The strike wasn't a traditional assassination. It was a strategic disruption. A carefully orchestrated series of events that would unravel his entire network without leaving any direct trace back to its source. One conversation. A series of strategically planted digital breadcrumbs. A financial transaction subtly redirected. By the time the dust settled, the target's entire operational infrastructure would collapse like a house of cards. Dr. Chun watched her final mission briefing with a look that was part pride, part clinical assessment. "Remember," he said, "your greatest weapon is not the skills you've learned. It's your ability to become whoever the mission requires." The phoenix tattoo seemed to burn against her skin, a constant reminder of her ability to transform, to rise from the ashes of each mission, to reinvent herself completely. When the mission concluded, there were no celebrations. No debriefing room filled with congratulations. Just a simple note from Victoria Reyes. Objective achieved. Prepare for the next phase. Elena understood now what her parents had been preparing her for her entire life. She wasn't just an operative. She was a living, breathing strategic asset capable of reshaping global dynamics with nothing more than her mind and a carefully constructed plan. The first strike was complete, but the war was just beginning. Project Phoenix had created something the world had never seen before. An operative who could move between world scientific researcher, geological expert, shadow strategist, leaving no trace, changing everything. The Andean mountain range wasn't just a geographical location. It was a labyrinth of geopolitical tensions, hidden resources, and secrets that could reshape global power dynamics. Elena's geological survey was nothing of the sort. The research permit was flawless, a meticulously crafted document that would withstand the most intense scrutiny. To the local authorities, she was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned geological researcher from an international conservation institute. Her equipment was precisely calibrated, her approach academically impeccable. But beneath the surface, every movement was a calculated strategic operation. The region was a powder keg. Multiple international corporations were competing for mineral rights in an area that held more than just geological significance. Rare earth elements critical to advanced technology, potential energy reserves, and strategic positioning that could tip the balance of regional power, all hidden within the mountain's complex geological formations. Her mission wasn't about collecting rock samples. It was about gathering intelligence that could prevent a potential international conflict. The team accompanying her was carefully selected. On the surface, they were a diverse group of international researchers, a Brazilian geochemist, a Chilean mapping specialist, an Argentinian environmental analyst. In reality, each was a highly trained operative with specific skills carefully masked by their academic credentials. Dr. Chun's briefing echoed in her mind. Information is terrain. and you're going to map every inch of it. The first week was about establishing credibility. Elena's research was genuine. It was the brilliance of Project Phoenix. They didn't create false narratives. They amplified existing truths, making the covert mission blend seamlessly with legitimate scientific exploration. Her geological analysis revealed something far more complex than anyone expected. The mountain range wasn't just a geological formation. It was a strategic chessboard where multiple international actors were positioning their pieces. A Chinese state-owned mining corporation was conducting unauthorized exploratory work. An American tech consortium had silent agreements with local political figures. Russian intelligence was monitoring the entire region through a network of seemingly innocent research stations. Elena began to construct a three-dimensional intelligence map, not on any digital system that could be compromised. Her method was old school and unbreakable. Handwritten notes, carefully coded geological annotations that looked like standard research documentation to anyone who might intercept them. The local indigenous communities became her most valuable asset. Years of training in cultural navigation meant she could build trust quickly. What seemed like casual conversations were intricate intelligence-gathering operations. She understood their language, their cultural nuances, their deep connection to the land. On the 17th day, everything changed. A minor geological anomaly caught her attention. To an untrained eye, it would have been nothing more than an interesting rock formation. But Elena recognized it immediately, a potential indicator of a much larger, more dangerous scenario. The area showed signs of unauthorized underground infrastructure. Not a mining operation, something else entirely. Her team was unaware. Or at least, they appeared to be. Each member of the research group was playing their own complex game, their true motivations hidden behind academic credentials and professional courtesy. Communication with Project Phoenix was minimal and highly encrypted. Short, precise data bursts that would appear as nothing more than routine research transmissions to any intercepting intelligence agency. The indigenous community leader, an elderly man named Raphael, became an unexpected ally. His knowledge of the land went beyond generations. It was almost mystical in its precision. What he shared with Elena went far beyond any geological survey. The mountains remember, he told her one evening, his eyes holding generations of unspoken history. And sometimes, what they remember can destroy entire civilizations. His cryptic statement wasn't just folklore. It was a warning. By the mission's end, Elena had gathered intelligence that would reshape global strategic positioning. But more importantly, she had prevented a potential conflict that could have destabilized an entire region. The geological survey report that would be published would be entirely legitimate, peer-reviewed, scientifically sound. Nobody would ever know about the true depth of what had been uncovered. As she prepared to leave, the phoenix tattoo seemed to pulse against her skin, a reminder of her ability to transform, to rise from the complexity of the mission, to become something entirely new. Project Phoenix had sent her in as a geological researcher. She was leaving as something far more dangerous. The mountains watched, the secrets remained. And somewhere, the next phase of the global strategic game was already being prepared. The safe house in Prague was anything but safe. Elena understood that intelligence was never about absolute truths. It was about layers each, one peeled back, revealing another complex narrative beneath. But what she discovered here would shake the very foundations of everything she believed about Project Phoenix. Her encrypted communication channel, a system so secure it was considered unbreakable, had been compromised. Not by an external threat. From within, the first indication came subtly. A micro-discrepancy in a transmission protocol. A fractional delay in an encrypted response. To anyone else, it would have been invisible. But Elena had been trained to see the invisible. Dr. Chun's sudden reassignment had been the first warning. A man who had been her primary handler, her mentor, disappeared without a trace. No official communication, no explanation. Just silence. Victoria Reyes, the woman who had initially recruited her, was no longer responding through official channels. Her digital footprint had become ghost-like, fragmentary. The documents Elena had been collecting, the intelligence gathered from multiple global operations, told a story far more complex than a simple national security mission. This was about something larger. A network that transcended governmental boundaries, a system that manipulated global dynamics like a complex chess game. Financial trails led through shell corporations spread across continents. Geological survey data became encrypted communication channels. Research grants were nothing more than money laundering operations. Every seemingly legitimate institutional framework was a potential cover for something more sinister. Project Phoenix wasn't just an intelligence operation. It was an ecosystem of manipulation. Her parents' training came flooding back. Miguel Rodriguez's lessons about never trusting a single source of information. Sophia's teachings about deconstructing complex systems, seeing beyond the obvious narrative. Elena began to map the network. Not digitally, that could be traced. Her method was old school and untraceable. Physical notes, connections drawn in a language only she could understand. Each connection revealed another layer of the conspiracy. The geological surveys she had conducted weren't just about gathering scientific data. They were strategic positioning operations, identifying potential conflict zones, resource-rich territories, areas of geopolitical tension. But the true purpose went deeper. Someone was playing a long game. A game that involved reshaping global power dynamics through controlled chaos. Her phoenix tattoo seemed to burn with a warning. A reminder that transformation often comes through destruction. The key breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A seemingly random communication intercept. A financial transaction that didn't make sense. A research grant that was routed through 17 different international banking systems before reaching its final destination. The conspiracy wasn't just about one organization or one government. It was a transnational network that had been building its infrastructure for decades. Military-industrial complexes, tech corporations, research institutions, all were potential nodes in this vast, interconnected system. And Project Phoenix was just one tentacle of a much larger organism. Elena realized she was no longer just an operative. She had become a threat to a system that had been carefully constructed over generations. The betrayal wasn't personal. It was systemic. Project Phoenix had been preparing her for this moment her entire life. Not to be a soldier, not to be an intelligence operative, but to be a catalyst. Someone who could see the entire system, understand its complexities, and potentially dismantle it. Her mother's forensic analysis skills, her father's strategic operational training, her own geological expertise. Everything had been leading to this moment. The safe house became her operational center. Every surface covered with meticulously constructed intelligence maps, connections drawn in invisible ink, encrypted communication channels that would appear as nothing more than random digital noise to any intercepting system. Victoria Reyes had taught her one critical lesson during her recruitment. In our world, there are no permanent allies, only permanent interests. Now, Elena was about to test that philosophy to its absolute limit. She wasn't just gathering intelligence anymore. She was preparing to become the most dangerous kind of operative, one who understood the entire system and was willing to burn it all down to rebuild something better. The Phoenix tattoo wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a promise. Destruction, transformation, rebirth. As dawn broke over Prague, Elena Rodriguez began to construct the most complex operational plan of her life. A plan that would challenge everything she had been taught, everything she believed about national security, about loyalty, about the very nature of global power. The betrayal network was about to meet its most unexpected threat, herself. Destruction is in art form, and Elena Rodriguez was about to become its master. The network she had uncovered couldn't be dismantled through traditional means. Conventional intelligence approaches would only alert the system, allowing it to adapt, to hide, to survive. Her strategy required something far more precise as surgical, deconstruction that would expose the entire infrastructure without giving it a chance to regenerate. Her first move came from an unexpected direction: academic research. A series of seemingly unrelated geological papers began to appear in international journals. Each one meticulously researched, peer-reviewed, scientifically impeccable. But beneath the academic language lay a complex communication system, a coded narrative that would slowly unravel the entire network. Dr. Chun had taught her that information was terrain, and she was about to reshape that terrain completely. The Phoenix tattoo wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was an operational blueprint. Her approach was multi-layered. Financial trails would be exposed through carefully constructed forensic accounting. Geopolitical connections would be revealed through academic research. Technological infrastructure would be systematically compromised through cyber operations that left no traditional digital fingerprints. She assembled a team not through traditional recruitment, but through carefully identified individuals who had been unknowingly impacted by the network's operations. A Brazilian data analyst whose environmental research had been suppressed. A Chinese telecommunications engineer who had discovered suspicious network patterns. An Iranian geological researcher whose groundbreaking work had been systematically buried. Each member brought a unique skill set. More importantly, they brought a personal motivation that transcended traditional operational parameters. The safe house in Prague transformed into something between a research facility and a strategic command center. Walls covered with complex intelligence maps. Communication channels that existed in the spaces between traditional digital infrastructure. Victoria Reyes had created a weapon. But weapons, Elena understood, could be reprogrammed. Her mother's forensic analysis skills merged with her father's operational strategies. Years of training became more than just a skill set. They became a comprehensive approach to systematic deconstruction. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A seemingly innocuous geological survey in the South China Sea revealed a network of underwater communication infrastructure that went far beyond traditional telecommunications. What appeared to be research about marine geological formations was actually a comprehensive mapping of global communication vulnerabilities. Each operation was a calculated risk. Each piece of intelligence gathered was a potential trigger point. Elena understood that true transformation wasn't about destruction. It was about creating space for something new to emerge. The network she was challenging had existed for generations. It had shaped global dynamics through controlled chaos, through the manipulation of information, through the strategic positioning of resources. Her approach would be its complete antithesis: transparency, systematic exposure, the complete dismantling of hidden infrastructures. Her team worked with a precision that bordered on surgical. Communication was minimal, encrypted, through methods that predated digital technology. Handwritten notes, coded language that would appear as nothing more than academic correspondence. The Phoenix metaphor became literal. Each layer of the network they exposed was a form of burning. Each revealed connection was a flame that would consume the existing structure. Dr. Chun's final lesson echoed in her mind. True intelligence isn't about gathering information. It's about creating new possibilities. She was doing exactly that. Financial trails were meticulously documented. not to be used as traditional evidence. That would be too simplistic, but as a comprehensive map that would allow investigative journalists, academic researchers, and ethical governmental agencies to continue the work of exposure. Technological vulnerabilities were identified and documented not to be immediately exploited, but to create a comprehensive understanding of the system's weaknesses. Geopolitical connections were mapped, revealing the complex web of relationships that had allowed this network to operate with impunity for generations. By the time the first major revelations began to surface, Elena and her team would be invisible, not through traditional methods of concealment, but through a comprehensive strategy of strategic transparency. The phoenix rises not through dramatic action, but through the patient, meticulous process of transformation. As dawn broke over Prague, Elena looked at the complex intelligence map that covered the safe house walls. What appeared to be a chaotic collection of information was actually a precise blueprint for systemic change. Project Phoenix had created her to be a weapon. She was becoming something far more dangerous, a catalyst. The system was about to meet its most unexpected threat: itself. The Sonoran Desert, where everything began, would be where everything ended. Elena Rodriguez stood exactly where she had been during that first geological survey, the wind playing with her hair, revealing the phoenix tattoo that had been her lifelong companion. But this was no ordinary survey. This was her final mission, her ultimate transformation. The lines she painted now were more than geological markers. They were coordinates of a revolution. Project Phoenix had created her to be a weapon. She had become something far more dangerous, a catalyst of systemic change. The intelligence network she had systematically dismantled over the past months was more than just a collection of corrupt institutions. It was a living, breathing organism that had controlled global dynamics for generations. And now she was about to deliver its final diagnosis. Her team, a collection of individuals from different continents, different backgrounds, had become more than just an operational unit. They were architects of a new kind of global accountability. The final operation was a symphony of precision. Simultaneously, across multiple continents, carefully curated information would be released, not through traditional media channels, not through government communications, but through a complex, decentralized network that would make traditional information suppression impossible. Academic journals would publish groundbreaking research that exposed systemic vulnerabilities. Encrypted communication channels would release financial trails that connected seemingly unrelated global entities. Geological survey data would reveal hidden infrastructure that challenged existing geopolitical narratives. Victoria Reyes, her original recruiter, was watching. Elena was certain of it. This wasn't about revenge. This was about creating a new paradigm of global understanding. Her father's tactical training merged with her mother's analytical precision. Years of preparation had led to this moment. A moment that would redefine the very concept of intelligence operations. The range lines she painted were more than markers. They were a message. Each stroke of her brush was calculated. Each movement deliberate. The geological survey equipment around her was a cover, but also a genuine tool. Science and strategy were no longer separate. They had become one. The wind picked up, and with it came a sense of inevitability. Elena understood now what her entire life had been preparing her for. Project Phoenix hadn't just trained her. They had created a living system of transformation, an operative who could see beyond traditional boundaries of intelligence, of nationality, of operational constraints. Her communication with her team was minimal, encrypted, nearly invisible. A researcher in Brazil would release a comprehensive environmental impact report. A data analyst in Germany would expose financial networks that had remained hidden for decades. A former military strategist in Canada would publish a series of academic papers that would challenge existing geopolitical paradigms. And here, in the Sonoran Desert, Elena Rodriguez would be the catalyst that would set everything in motion. The phoenix tattoo burned against her skin, no longer just a symbol, but a living manifestation of her journey. Destruction, transformation, rebirth. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, Elena completed her final geological survey lines. To an untrained eye, they were nothing more than standard research markings. To those who knew how to read, they were a complex communication system that would trigger a global cascade of revelations. Project Phoenix had created her to be a weapon. She had become something else entirely. A bridge, a catalyst, a living communication system that could transform how global information was understood, processed, and acted upon. The first revelations would begin within hours. Financial networks would start to unravel. Hidden infrastructure would be exposed. Systemic vulnerabilities would become public knowledge. But Elena wouldn't be there to witness it directly. Her role was to initiate, not to observe. As darkness fell across the Sonoran Desert, she packed her equipment with the same precision she had used to paint the range lines. Each movement calculated, each action purposeful. Victoria Reyes had once told her that in their world there were no permanent allies, only permanent interests. Elena had redefined that philosophy. Permanent interests weren't about control. They were about creating possibilities, about challenging existing systems, about giving humanity a chance to understand the complex networks that had controlled global dynamics for generations. The wind continued to blow. The desert watched. And somewhere, a new chapter of global understanding was about to begin. Elena Rodriguez, geological researcher, intelligence operative, catalyst, disappeared into the night. The phoenix had risen.